I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to this session of Shrinking Trump.
John, this is our 29th show. We began 6 months ago because we were so concerned about Donald Trump's cognitive decline. We were seeing signs of dementia in all kinds of ways, his language, his thinking, even his physical gait. But we also, from the beginning, talked about how that pathology was, in a sense, sitting on top of what had long been recognized by John and other psychologists as a severe personality disorder we call malignant narcissism, when someone suffering from this disorder has no empathy for others, has no inherent morality, takes great pleasure in diminishing others, and needs to be pumping or puffing himself up with grandiose thoughts and with adulation from others. So we'd always seen that. Well, now that Trump has won the election and is beginning to appoint a cabinet of very disturbed and inappropriate, inexperienced people, what I was saying to John as we were thinking about the show is we're going to keep on the lookout for the cognitive decline, but really it's the severe personality disorder, which is front and center. John?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about his cabinet of horrors and really how it is so in line with what a malignant narcissist would do once they were able to take over a society and wanted to burn down all of its institutions. But before we get to that, we wanted to reflect on your comments, you, the readers and the viewers of our show last week, because we said last week that our show was a therapy session.
Yeah.
We didn't play any clips. We wanted to help people process what has been a traumatic experience. And what I'm afraid, Harry, is going to be a rolling traumatic experience, right? And that's really part of the dread that people are feeling, not just the sense of shock and disappointment and grief, but really the sense that we are, basically going over some kind of cliff. And we'll be talking about that. But I wanted to start the show with actually reading about 6 or 7 verbatim quotes from our audience, and because each of them represents something that a lot of people were saying. And again, we are trying to help you as psychologists. We're trying to help you process your feelings, as we're also being honest about
And
processing
ours. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Harry and I are going to kind of alternate, but we're going to read some of the comments that we got from last week. Dr. Segal: many people have stopped watching, even unsubscribed from some channels, so we can take a mental break. We've invested our energy for the past 9 years, even more in the last month since 47 announced his candidacy again. We are exhausted of his relentless rambling and whining. In the early hours of Wednesday, my body froze and experienced an intense anxiety attack. I've been sick for 2 full days and not quite recovered yet. I hope we will feel better as the days go by and slowly swallow this bitter pill. Thank you both for verbalizing our feelings and acknowledging our pain, and thank you for the beautiful ending of this episode. So many people said, I haven't been able to watch any media. I've been feeling sick. I've been feeling withdrawn. I've been staying in bed, but I wanted to watch your show just to see how you would process it. And thank you. I cannot tell you how many people thanked us. This is really unusual in the comments. And I found the comments so touching. To be honest, I teared up a couple of times reading the comments.
No, it was wonderful. And I think we were just really being very honest. I mean, I hadn't been able to watch any media after the election. Recently I've been listening to an audiobook of Catch 22, which I hadn't read. I read when I was in my 20s and is unbelievably funny and dark and satiric. I recommend it to all of you who are staying off of media. But really, I think we needed to open up and invite everyone to think about their feelings. And I think moving forward, although we have a lot of media clips to talk about, I want us to keep checking in with you and with each other about how we're doing, because as John said, there's a lot of terrible things ahead, I believe. Struggles, conflicts. Trump always wants to be in the public's eye at all times, even if he's doesn't matter what he's doing, he needs to be in your head. And I remember in 2016, and I feel this way now, that even though he's announcing picks and being his usual disturbed self, I feel like there's a little bit of a pause before he actually takes power. It doesn't mean it's not frightening and terrible things are happening, but the real struggle begins on January 20th. That's when it really starts.
I'm going to say I think things are moving pretty quickly, but let's wait until we talk about the cabinet picks. Let's talk more about the viewers.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you, John. I'm just saying when he can actually do things is January 20th, and that's what I'm most afraid of.
Well, let's look at the next comment.
I was so relieved to hear this podcast. Thank you for your coping advice. It has really got me through this dark period. I know that there are decent and good people in the U.S. I will continue to support and listen to this podcast. Thank you both so much. And someone else wrote, both Harry and John reflect what I'm feeling, which is grief, as if someone close to me has died, on top of which I feel a deep fear.
Yeah, grief and fear.
Right.
I think that's what people are really going through. This next person mentioned grief as well. John and Harry, I very much appreciate your labeling this in part grief, as that's exactly what it is, and it's what it feels like. Tens of millions are mourning the loss of the country we, all our lives, believed we lived in. Thank you for your humanity and courage and for all you do. Yeah, I think there really is a feeling of mourning that that we've lost the country, that the democracy and the country that we believed in has died, and that may be true. And so, we may be having to cope with some really, really tough stuff. And by the way, I can appreciate that many people may not want to watch this program anymore. I'm serious. And may not want to pay attention to media and may want to withdraw and just focus on their lives and the things that bring them joy and the things that they control. And I have no judgment against those people. That's perfectly fine as a coping device. I will say, though, however, I don't think we're really going to be able to blind ourselves to what's happening. It's going to be so overwhelming and so ongoing that we're not actually going to be able to entirely escape ourselves from it. So the option then is to face it with that kind of radical acceptance that we were talking about last week. But what we're going to have to accept may be really, really tough.
And it's what's occurring to me at the moment is there's grief over the loss of Kamala Harris and what she could have done. There's also anticipatory anxiety about what is to come. And clinicians know that the most virulent form of anxiety is anticipatory anxiety because it imports the sense of I'm going to be powerless in the future. Like terrible things are going to happen. I don't even know what they are yet, but they're coming. And that's why I also think in this interim period, before he can start signing terrible orders that he's going to sign, we should be prepared, but also take the time to also embrace our life, because it's going to be rough seas.
Yeah, we're going to need to guard our own mental health.
Absolutely.
Somebody mentioned the issue of his being a victimizer of women.
Yeah, I read that. Thank you for recognizing the victimization of women. That is exactly why I'm feeling such rage.
Simple, but really, to give voice to what women must be feeling when a rapist has been elected president. Then we've also heard from a number of people in Germany.
Can I read this one?
Sure.
Germany here, we feel re-traumatized. All the hatred against immigrants, the rift that runs through society and even families, the feeling of fear, loathing, and despair, while our neighbors express fanatical admiration and revengeful satisfaction. This hits too close to home. Hitler was also seen as ridiculous until he was no longer. And fun fact, Hitler was also a convicted criminal and in jail in 1923. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Thank you, Harry and John. Keep up the good work.
It's very touching to get those kind of comments from Germany. We had a lot of comments like that from people in Germany, that for them, this is a nightmare, that we seem to be following in their footsteps. And of course, the fact that Hitler was jailed for an attempted coup and then given the chance essentially to back up and repeat it and win through an election is exactly what the Biden justice system at Merrick Garland just allowed Trump to do.
Yeah, I have dear friends in Germany, both therapists, and one is also a poet, and they have been following this so closely. We don't realize how closely the world follows our politics. We have people, a whole group writing from Australia.
Yes, we do. We do. Thank you. We appreciate you. And from other countries as well. All right. Well, we got one letter from a social worker, another therapist. She said, "Thank you so much for this, quote, emergency session. It actually helped a lot. This has become my favorite podcast, so I do hope you'll keep going with it. I'm a 65-year-old therapist, LCSW, and one of my clients described having to leave work early on Wednesday because of his despair over what's going to happen to the climate with 4 more years of Trump. The DBT radical acceptance helped me. Thank you so much for putting this out. We need it." We'll be happy to talk more about radical acceptance because I think, to be honest, you're almost going to have to become a practicing Buddhist to get through these 4 years. Do you know what I mean? A coping device, because mindfulness meditation does get us in touch, with our own consciousness, our own inner consciousness, which is so easily, can be so easily eclipsed by all of the negative events that are happening around us. That
and John and I really been having a lot of discussions about what this show should look like moving forward. When we launched this show in the twilight of a campaign, so there was tons of stuff, and yes, there's already a lot we're going to show you today. We have to get to it, but I think we need to each show to talk about coping mechanisms, things like radical acceptance and mindfulness, but also helping you all to think about what is being evoked when you feel that anticipatory anxiety, ways of being able to examine your own experience. And also, most importantly, and I know this is going to sound very old-fashioned, but I don't know if you know the term, it's used a lot, but no one thinks about it, that we all feel, for example, in this election, demoralized. Well, what does demoralization really means? It means you feel that your own morality is no longer effective. You can no longer hang on to your values because you've been demoralized. Someone who's demoralized, you can't rely on them to be soldiers anymore, right? They've lost their way. And I think we have to be moralized. We have to hold on to our values. So it's acceptance, it's reflection, it's mindfulness, but it's also a kind of insistence on the kind of world we want to be in, and remembering it, even if we're facing opposition.
And one of the ways to do that is to band together and to remind ourselves of reality. And so I appreciated this listener. "I live in a condo, and I'm going to invite my neighbors over and show this episode to help us talk about our upset feelings and help all of us cope. Thank you, thank you." So I'm not suggesting that everybody have a shrinking Trump watch party, but I think what that person was saying is sharing our experience, sharing our pain, sharing our grief, sharing our fear, and sharing our values and what we stand for is very important. Rachel Maddow had this show where she said, just join a group. It could be a bowling league, it could be a church, but just join an organization, because when we're atomized, right, we're so much less powerful than when we remind ourselves of who we are and what our values are through our engagement with others. All right. Well, the last one I'm going to show, Harry, I'll let you read this one, is, what was interesting is last week I was much more dire in my predictions, and you were more guardedly optimistic, or qualifiedly optimistic, or at least offering more hope, I would say.
I was less alarmed than you, but not optimistic.
Okay. So I was more fatalistic, or more pessimistic, let's put it. And
Yes.
I will say that at about a like 80 to 20 ratio, the audience agreed with me, which is rare. They usually agree with you. But here they were saying, Harry, you're so naive. I wish it wasn't true. But Harry, John, I agree with John this time. So that said, I did not put on the screen one of the quotes of people disagreeing with you. I just want to let people know, I'm verbally explaining it, that most of them disagreed with you. But I liked this quote because what I actually think is the balance between you and I is actually very valuable.
You and me, the balance between you and me.
Yeah, well, I didn't get a PhD in English at Yale like you did.
Well,
but let's see this last viewer. You could read this one, Harry.
I will. Wow, I needed that appointment. In lieu of payment, I hope you will accept multiple shares. Thank you, Doctors Gartner and Segal. Your description of radical acceptance was very helpful. I've already discussed it with my husband. In my house, I'm the fatalist, and he is the optimist. I appreciated hearing your interactions that mimic what is going on in our home. Thanks again, Bonnie of the Resistance. I have to say, folks, my feelings are never hurt if people tell me to grow up or they disagree with me. I'm just so happy there's dialogue, that you guys are posting, that you're talking. That's what I want more than anything else, really.
All right. So we're going to turn to looking at Trump's cabinet picks. One of the things that I have said in the more negative view is that this is going to happen much more quickly than people expect. That they've been here before. They're ready to take action. They have a 900-page document, Project 2025. They know what they're up to. And they're ready to go. So here is our new form of government. Learn this. This is a new vocabulary word for everybody. You're going to be hearing this word a lot. Kakistocracy. Government by the worst people. You may recognize the root kaka as being the same root as like caca, like shit. Okay. So it's literally government by the shittiest people. That's what it is.
Which is a catastocracy, right? All right.
Kakistocracy. I know it's hard to say, actually. I tried to say it last week and I couldn't. We had to edit it out because I kept stumbling over it. Kakistocracy. So remember this word, okay? So because not only is he picking the worst people, but this is really important. What you'll see, we're going to go through some of these lists, right, of his appointees. George Conway called me like a few minutes before the show. He said he was going to be going on CNN. And he said, look, I just want to make sure got this right. That as a malignant narcissist, he revels in destruction, right? I said, right. He says, from his cabinet picks, it seems quite clear that he has an intent to simply destroy the U.S. government. And that's true. For one thing, destroying the U.S. government means there's no impediments to his absolute power. All right. So if we look at these cabinet picks, keep in mind that there's a through line, aside from the fact that these people are unqualified, aside from the fact that they are corrupt and clearly on the side of the insurrection, they also have in common this glee and this promise that they will take an axe, a sledgehammer, a chainsaw to the U.S. government. So let's start with RFK Jr. Now, we just learned since we put this show together that he has been nominated to be the head of Health and Human Services.
Oh, right? So, I didn't know that.
Yep, it just happened. And so here he is, a vaccine denier and a medical kook is now in charge of our medical system. Here is a headline from the New York Post. RFK Jr. success suggests 600 people from the National Institutes of Health who will be fired on day one of Trump's second term. Now, Harry, I know as an educator at Cornell, you've placed hundreds of students at the National Institute of Health, right,
Sure.
for research positions.
Oh, yeah.
The National Institute of Health is the nerve center of our scientific and medical research. So if you wanted to make life better in America, is the first thing you'd want to do is just sort of lop off the infrastructure of our medical research community?
The NIH is the greatest medical laboratories in the world. Bar none.
Yeah.
No, but also RFK is disturbed. I mean, he's
crazy.
Disturbed. He's
right. So this is another one of all of these picks are almost nihilistic.
They're anti-choices.
They're anti-choices, right? We're going to pick a medical nut to be in charge of medicine. Well, who are we going to put in charge of the environment? Let's see that clip. Trump picks new EPA head, guaranteed to destroy the environment. Lee Zeldin has gladly accepted Trump's decision to nominate him for the EPA administrator. This will be a disaster. For those of you who don't know, Lee Zeldin is a rabid climate denier and has really stated that his intention is to destroy the Environmental Protection Agency, not to lead it, but to deconstruct it.
Which Trump's pick in 2016 was dedicated in the same way.
Yes.
Let's not forget.
Yes, that's right.
And that's why bureaucracies have a way of pushing back.
Well, I think what we're going to see here, though, in this theme is the systematic campaign to degrade the bureaucracy's ability to fight back, specifically by firing anybody who pushes back.
Okay. Let's go on to the next one.
Let's go on to the next one. So who did he nominate to be the Secretary of Defense? Peter Hegseth has said exactly how he'll shake up the Pentagon. Trump's nominee for defense secretary has called for a war on what he called the woke military, including potentially firing top brass. Now, for those of you who might not know who Peter Hegseth is, he's a broadcaster on Fox. He's one of the Fox and Friends. He's a Fox and friend. He has no administrative experience. He's never run anything. He has been a soldier, so at least he has that experience. But yeah, right. You and I used to make fun of the fact that, Trump was interviewed by the Fox and Friends B team on Saturday. So I was going to say to you, Harry, hey, look, it could be worse. He could have nominated a member of the Fox and Friends B team to be Secretary of Defense. That woman?
I know.
That woman, every time Trump said something crazy, she said, I know. So maybe he could have nominated her to be Secretary of Defense. It says,
but it gets worse, because the Pentagon is one of the toughest bureaucracies to run. It's immense. It's huge. Bill Gates, who was Bush's Secretary of Defense that Obama kept on, he kept him on because Gates knew everybody. He knew how to run it. Even right-wing Republicans are talking about how this is insane. They'll eat him for breakfast. But wait till you hear more about him. Right, John?
Yeah, right. Well, first of all, just again, his mission, though, is to fire, right, as many Democratic, left-wing, woke, whatever you want to call them, but to purge the military as much as possible.
And to put together a committee of retired generals who will then support whatever people they want to fire from the brass.
Right. So that's the purge. And so, so who is Peter Hegseth really? Well, we've done a little research. We've learned a little more about him. Let's see a picture of Peter.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. For those of you who are just listening, okay, here's a picture of him with his shirt off, with his entire chest and arms are covered with right-wing, like dominionist, conspiracy-oriented, right-wing, Christian nationalist symbols. So reading this tweet yesterday, Trump announced he's nominating Peter Hegseth. Hegseth's a prominent Fox personality and veterans advocate, but he also has strong ties to the Christian far right, which has not been fully exposed. So those of you who, again, are listening, you can't see the tweets, see the tattoos, but let me read a description of them from this article. What's the deal with Pete Hegseth's Crusader tattoos. Donald Trump's potential Secretary of Defense hasn't been straightforward about the violent symbolism of his ink. Actually, Harry, maybe you can read this quote about his tattoos.
Sure. Hegseth has previously brought up the issue himself. He claims that one of his tattoos, a Jerusalem cross on his chest, led to his dismissal from guard duty during Biden's inauguration in 2021 because his unit leaders deemed it evidence of his being an, quote, extremist and a, quote, potential threat. Hegseth insinuates that he was discriminated against for having this, quote, religious image on his body. But this symbol is not only religious, it has always carried a political valence. Hegseth's right arm is covered from top to bottom, and most of the images draw from Revolutionary era propaganda, primarily associated nowadays with the patriot rhetoric of militia movements and QAnon. 3 of these are clearly visible in the cover photo for one of his books, American Crusade. 1, the year 1775 in Roman numerals. 2, We the People in a stylized colonial script. And 3, an American flag with a modified M4 superimposed over the lower bars. He has also Ben Franklin's famous Join or Die.
So he was literally excluded from National Guard duty during Biden's inauguration because he was deemed a threat because of his tattoos made him seem like such a white supremacist extremist that he couldn't pass muster to serve as a soldier in the National Guard on duty during the inauguration. But now he's going to be in charge of the entire military. And he's already vowed that he's going to take women out of combat duty, that he's going to get rid of trans people, and of course, that he's going to fire all the woke generals.
And of course, the real danger, when we know that democracy is over, is if the military joins forces with Trump. However it's done. If they are unfettered, then we're done.
Right. But you know what, Harry? It gets worse. It gets worse.
Wait a minute. Are you thinking of Tulsi? Innocent Tulsi?
Sweet, innocent Tolstoyevsky. Because little Tulsi is a Russian asset. Of course. So for those of you who don't know, she has now been nominated for the Director of National Intelligence. Okay. And I'm not just saying she's a Russian asset. Russia is saying she's a Russian asset. Can we see that tweet? Now, this is a tweet from Nicholas Kristof, a very conservative New York Times columnist. Trump's choice for Director of National Intelligence was hailed on Russian state TV as Russia's, quote, this is what Russia state TV called Tulsi, as Russia's, quote, girlfriend and a, quote, agent. Imagine what the professionals in the intelligence community are thinking now. Imagine what the Russians secretly working for the U.S. are thinking now. So what they show here is a picture of a Russian TV show. I'm going to play you a 20-second clip. It's a little confusing, especially for those of you who are just listening, because unfortunately the person is talking in Russian and there's no translation. But so it's kind of a little chaotic because while he's talking in Russian, talking about Tulsi Gabbard as our girlfriend and our agent, they're showing video of Tulsi Gabbard being interviewed by Tucker Carlson, who, of course, we know is a Russian agent. He went to Russia and interviewed Putin. Here he is. You can't quite hear the interview because the Russian's on top of it, but they're showing him interviewing her, and she's making apologies for Russia while the Russian narrator is describing her as our agent. So it's just 20 seconds. Let's just see that Russian video.
Ну, дайте им американцев поставлю, там Туси, наша подружка, что говорит, Туси Габбард. Говорят слова Байдена про смену власти в России. Мне кажется, что это не оговорка. Говорят, президент Байден просто вслух озвучил цели своей администрации, которые заключаются в смене власти в России и в отстранении Путина от власти.
You know, Harry, people have been worrying about us pulling out of NATO. NATO has to pull out of us. if our intelligence service is run by somebody who's working with Russia, then our NATO partners can no longer share intelligence with us. And this has already begun to happen. I've been reading
Already
articles.
began to happen. They're already talking about it.
Yeah.
Oh,
We can't be trusted.
It's such a disaster.
Such a disaster.
All right. So that's all, right? He hasn't made any other decisions yet.
Oh, no, it gets worse, Harry. It gets even worse. Okay. So he is nominated to be the head of the CIA. I think it's the CIA. Was it the FBI? I think it's the CIA. Kash Patel. So let's if you're not familiar with Kash Patel, Harry, why don't you help people remind them of who he is?
Justice Department offers immunity to Trump aide for testimony in the documents case. The advisor, Kash Patel, had previously declined to answer questions from prosecutors in front of a federal grand jury, citing his Fifth Amendment rights. The Justice Department offered on Wednesday to allow Kash Patel, a close advisor to former President Donald J. Trump, to testify to a federal grand jury under a grant of immunity about Mr. Trump's handling of highly sensitive presidential records, two people familiar with the matter said. The offer of immunity came about a month after Mr. Patel invoked his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination in front of the grand jury and refused to answer questions from prosecutors investigating whether Mr. Trump improperly took national security documents with him when he left the White House and subsequently obstructed attempts by the government to retrieve them.
So, in other words, someone who has recently been under investigation by the FBI for committing espionage and was given immunity for his crimes of espionage to testify against Trump for stealing top secret classified documents that he aided and abetted him in, will now be the head of the FBI in charge of investigating espionage.
With no background in intelligence, right? I mean, he's just
Harry,
an aide.
It's on-the-job training. If you've been a spy, then you learn, from the ground up, the old-fashioned way.
Now, I'm just curious: is Trump? I mean, he agreed to have immunities. Why is Trump bringing him in?
Well, because he wants him to. I mean, look, the Russian aspect of this is so important, right? He's putting people in charge of the intelligence community, right, who are working for Vladimir Putin to destroy our intelligence community. I mean, that's what they have in common. These are all Russian sympathizers. These are all people who have participated in the insurrection. These are all people who are on the red team. And they're being put in charge. It's really putting the fox in charge of the henhouse, right? The intelligence community is supposed to be protecting us from Russia, not working for Russia.
Okay.
But
yes.
But that's not all. That's not all. No, if you act now, you can also get an ice crusher. No.
A cheese straightener.
That's right. An extra set of Ginsu knives. Because if you act now, you can also look at Trump's pick for Attorney General.
Oh, my God. This is the worst.
This is the worst. House Ethics Panel was set to vote to release report critical of Matt Gaetz. The committee has been investigating allegations that Mr. Gaetz, President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General, engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use. The House Ethics Committee, which has been investigating allegations that Representative Matt Gaetz engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, was prepared to vote to release a highly critical report about Mr. Gaetz on Friday, according to a Republican official familiar with the matter. The release would have come 2 days after elect Donald Trump selected Mr. Gaetz to be Attorney General. Mr. Gaetz, Republican, abruptly resigned from his House seat late Wednesday, effectively ending the ethics investigation that has hung over his head for years. So, in other words, the person who's being appointed Attorney General, is resigning from Congress to try to escape the report on his criminal activities. That's actually an ethics report. He's so egregious This is an ethics report that was been conducted by Republicans.
It's a bipartisan report.
A bipartisan report. He's that bad, you know.
And supposedly he's had maybe a minute of legal experience. I mean, after he graduated from law school, he worked at a firm for like a second, and then ran for office in Florida. So this is a guy with no experience. Again, Kash Patel has never run anything. He certainly hasn't run the CIA, or Hegseth, who's never run anything, and is going to run the Pentagon. These are all. They are all not just unfit, they're unqualified.
Right. And by the way, this is what dictators do, right? By picking people who are unqualified, they don't have the expertise and the institutional memory to push back, right?
The other thing that dictators do, which Trump did in the first term, is to bring in your family.
Sure. Absolutely.
But he's he's used that up. So now he's going this route.
Right. So you bring in cronies, and the important thing is that they're cronies, not that they have any expertise. In fact, it's a little better if they don't have expertise, because then they don't have any basis for challenging you. You know, it's what Stalin did. It's what Mao did. You know, so you bring in a potato farmer, you know, to be the head of the hospital, or the head of economics, you know, and the real scientists, you know, are put in a camp because they're dissidents, right? So we bring in, the people, you know, we get rid of these egg-headed experts who are counter-revolutionaries, and we bring in the people.
Yeah, well, that was just another form of this political violence.
So now, one of the things you talked about, him flooding the zone, right? So he's flooded the zone. I just want to point out, when I talk about how quickly this thing is happening, we're having this show basically a week from the election, right? And in this 1 week, just with these cabinet picks, he's really announcing, right, that he is going to be burning the government down, you know, almost immediately. So will there be any pushback? Because, of course, with these cabinet positions, right, the Senate is supposed to have the power constitutionally to advise and consent to cabinet picks. That's one of the constitutional safeguards that we have.
Right.
Right. So, but of course, the Republicans have been so supine. Well, according to NBC, the Republicans in the Senate were truly shocked by this appointment. Truly shocked. Let's look at that headline. Trump baffles Republican senators by picking Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. The Florida Congress will need support from the majority of the Senate to be confirmed, which some Republicans said will be a significant challenge. Let's see what some of the Republicans said. Senator Susan Collins of Maine sounded a note of skepticism. Obviously, the president has the right to nominate whoever he wishes, but I'm certain there will be a lot of questions, she said. Collins said the ethics probe will be one of the, quote, issues that's going to be raised, because as I understand it, there's an active investigation by the House Ethics Committee. Now, I want to point out that Susan Collins has many times said that she has a lot of questions that need to be asked, but she always seems in the end to roll over and vote for whoever Trump wants. Senator Kevin Cramer, though, of North Dakota, said Gaetz's confirmation prospects were, quote, a long shot, adding that it's, quote, very possible Trump is testing the limits of how far he can push the Senate.
Claire McCaskill made the argument that, you know, all you need is 3 Republican senators to oppose a nomination, and it's dead. And she named Collins and Lisa Murkowski, and I forget who the third one is, who she feels this is going to be very dicey. And she's a pretty good reader of the Senate. I don't know if we're going to talk about advise and consent in a moment. But there was also something up from the Times, John, on Matt Gaetz.
Yep. So we're going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, but first, this idea that he's trying to see how far he can push the Senate. What he's trying to do is remove the advise and consent inhibition on his ability to choose whoever he wants. Let's see that cover. Trump says Senate GOP leader candidates must agree to recess appointments. See, one of the things that he did during his first term, right, was he appointed people who were incredibly extreme and unqualified as recess appointments. If he didn't think he could get...
No, he made them acting.
Acting.
They weren't recess.
No, you're right. Acting.
It's a very important difference.
Yeah. But functionally, the person is in the role. They are acting.
But there are certain cabinet positions that cannot be acting. That's the issue. See, really? Some cabinet positions you can make them acting, others you can't. Like Attorney General. What's that?
But he had an acting Attorney General. Matt, what's his name? The guy who had the man toilet. You know who I'm talking about? Matt. What's his name? The bald guy. You know what I'm talking about? Rachel Maddow had a whole episode about this. He had a business where he actually invented a toilet for people with big dicks, so that it would be a tall toilet, so their penises wouldn't get wet.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I'm pretty sure that some cabinet positions you cannot make acting.
But he was an acting Attorney General, so
there may be a limited period of time when you can do that.
Maybe but he's trying to push those limits. He's trying to push those limits. He's trying to do that. So look, so here now is where democracy is meeting the rubber's meeting the road.
I've got to interrupt for a moment. That headline was from November 10th, and that was before the Republicans chose John Thune as their leader.
Yes.
And they did it because it's a secret vote. And the fact is that Thune, who is Mitch McConnell's protege, so he's anti-Trump, even though he says he's going to be a good leader for Trump. The question is, will they hold the line and refuse to make recess appointments? Because if the Republicans agree to that, they give up power.
Exactly.
And I'm not convinced that McConnell would ever agree to that.
Yeah. No, you're right to give that update, because the other candidate was Rick Scott.
Oh yeah,
Rick Scott. Well, he said he would. He made that part of his position. So, in other words, had Rick Scott been elected, then the Senate would have essentially been giving up its constitutional power of advice and consent. By the fact that they chose Scott means that they are fighting back. I'm going to skip this next thing about Kinzinger, and let's go straight to that New York Times editorial, Harry. Maybe you can read that for us.
Be happy to. Trump's reckless choices for national leadership. Donald Trump has demonstrated his lack of fitness for the presidency in countless ways, but one of the clearest is in the company he keeps, surrounding himself with fringe figures, conspiracy theorists and sycophants who put fealty to him above all else. This week, a series of cabinet nominations by Mr. Trump showed the potential dangers posed by his reliance on his inner circle in the starkest way possible. For three of the nation's highest ranking and most vital positions, Mr. Trump said he would appoint loyalists with no discernible qualifications for their jobs, people manifestly inappropriate for crucial positions of leadership in law enforcement and national security. The most irresponsible was his choice for Attorney General. To fill the post of the nation's chief law enforcement officer, the president-elect said he would nominate Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida. Yes, that Matt Gaetz, the one who called for the abolishment of the FBI and the entire Justice Department if they didn't stop investigating Mr. Trump, the one who was among the loudest congressional voices in denying the results of the 2020 election, who said he was, quote, proud of the work, unquote, that he and other deniers did on January 6, 2021, and who praised the Capitol rioters as patriotic Americans. In Mr. Trump's second term, senators will immediately be confronted with an extreme set of appointments, even worse than those of the first term. This makes all the more important that they preserve the ability to say no.
Right. And that's what it comes down to. Here's where, many of the towering oaks of our democracy, of our checks and balances have been felled, right? The Supreme Court, the Senate, now the House, the presidency. But there are still these other maybe thinner reeds, all right, that still are part of the structure of democracy. And we need to note when those are being challenged and note when those are being obstructed or destroyed, because that's what is going to be happening over the next few years. And we need to make note of it. So right now, this is where the rubber is meeting the road. Is the Senate going to push back on some of these extreme ones? And the thing is, they're flooding the zone with so many extreme inappropriate choices that even if they do get rid of Matt Gaetz, right, look at all of these other figures that are getting through. But we don't even know if they will have the balls to stand up against Matt Gaetz. We'll see.
We'll see.
Well, Harry, I wish I could say that was all the bad news. But there's more. There's more. There's another set of Ginsu knives. Okay. And this relates to someone who is not an elected part of his cabinet, but the person who I think may be the most dangerous person in America is actually Elon Musk. Let's look at this headline. How Elon Musk has eclipsed J.D. Vance to become Trump's real vice president. Elon Musk has done something really quite extraordinary. He's the richest man in the world. He is becoming Trump's BFF. And one of the things that we've thought about is, well, maybe Trump, as he becomes so demented, he'll be so demented, he won't be able to do any harm. He won't even know what's going on. But if you think of this in sort of Star Wars terms, Trump is sort of the aging, kind of decrepit, deteriorating emperor, but Elon Musk is kind of like his Darth Vader, right? He's energized and he's not demented. In fact, he's brilliant, right? And he is driven and ideologically jazzed about destroying the U.S. government. But look at let's look at this little piece of footage. He has been living at Mar-a-Lago, Harry, since the election because he's trying to cozy up to Trump. Let's see a reporting on that.
Mar-a-Lago has basically been brimming for the last 2 days, I'm told, with two kinds of people. Those angling for a job and those who are trying to influence Trump into hiring their picks. But one person has loomed over all of that. His name is Elon Musk. Multiple sources tell me tonight that Musk has been seen at Mar-a-Lago nearly every single day since Donald Trump won, dining with him on the patio at times. Today, they were seen on the golf course together. Musk has been in the room when world leaders have called Trump. And tonight, we've learned he's also weighing in on staffing decisions, making clear his preference for certain roles even. Publicly tonight, Elon Musk is backing Florida Senator Rick Scott as the next leader of the Republican conference to replace Mitch McConnell. While Musk himself is still not expected to take any kind of formal position inside Trump's administration, given how complicated it would be with his companies, what's becoming clearer tonight is that he doesn't really need to, with one source telling me Elon Musk is having just as much influence from the outside.
Be afraid, folks. Be very afraid. Elon Musk, he's like the Joker,
The only thing that I'm going to say that might happen is that Trump falls out with everybody and he doesn't like to be eclipsed. On the night of the election, when he had his kind of rally, at one point the crowd started chanting Elon, Elon, and Trump's face dropped. He never likes being outshone. So I'm hoping, I'm not predicting, but I'm hoping for a fallout because Trump can't maintain relationships with anybody.
Right. It's a good point. However, I will say that unlike some of the other people who have come under his sway, he never actually spoke against Trump. So it's not like, J.D. Vance, who first said I never liked him and now says he loves him. But also, I think he's doing a very, very good job of kissing Trump's ass, of seeming so enthusiastic about Trumpism. I want to show some footage that I'd wanted to show after the Madison Square Garden rally, and we didn't have time. But I want to show it now because Musk is being put in charge of something called DOGE, right? The Department of Government Efficiency. Okay. And let's remember the overall theme of all of these picks is we're going to destroy the government. Okay. That's the overall thing, whether we're going to destroy the intelligence community, whether we're going to destroy the EPA, we're going to destroy the Justice Department, we're going to light a match to it all. Well, look at Elon Musk's vision of what he wants to do to the government as he explains it in Madison Square Garden. And by the way, the person introducing him is someone who's actually in running for the Secretary of the Treasury. I'm blocking his name now. He's the head of Bear Stearns. That's who's introducing him at Madison Square Garden.
I'm not just MAGA. I'm dark, gothic MAGA. Well, the energy in this room is incredible. What a great group of people.
All right, I've only got one question for you, and then I'm getting out of here because this is your stage. But we set up Doge.
Yes.
How much do we...
We're going to get the government off your back and out of your pocketbook. And America's just not just going to be great. America is going to reach heights that it has never seen before. The future is going to be amazing.
God, he makes my skin crawl.
I know.
One thing I want to say, though, John, not to be fair to Musk, because he's terrible, but Republicans have been saying stuff like that for 50 years.
Sure.
That there's waste, we got to cut it out, that, the government should be smaller. So he's speaking as though he's an old Republican, but there's a much more radical agenda underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They're taking a chainsaw, to the, and by the way, in terms of what you were saying about the way he worships Trump, there was a thing where he was screaming and jumping up and down. I actually didn't show that one, that's got a lot of coverage. But even here he's like, I'm not just MAGA, I'm Gothic dog MAGA, whatever the hell that means.
Because his hat was in Gothic print saying,
yeah, but what's the dog part? I the Gothic part.
He's really creepy.
Right. But the point is that he's exuding that Hitler worship. You know what I mean? That I think, just because I agree with you, he falls out with everyone. But I just want to point out that Elon Musk is playing this really smart. Okay, he's worshiping this guy, he's puffing him up, he's fluffing him, at the same time as he's at the same time.
Interesting choice of words. That's all I'm going to say.
That's enough said. At the same time, he's kind of giving him a whole program, a radical program. But anyway, look, here's Trump's official announcement about Elon Musk's new position. Statement from Donald Trump. I am pleased to announce that the great Elon Musk, working in conjunction with American patriot Vivek Ramaswamy, will lead the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Together, these two wonderful Americans will pave the way for my administration to dismantle government bureaucracy, slash excess regulations, cut wasteful expenditures, and restructure federal agencies essential to Save America movement. This will send shockwaves through the system, and anyone involved in government waste, which is a lot of people, stated Mr. Musk, it will become potentially the Manhattan Project of our time. Republican politicians have dreamed, as you said, Harry, about the objective of DOGE for a very long time. To drive this kind of drastic change, the Department of Government Efficiency will provide advice and guidance from outside of government and will partner with the White House and the Office of Management and Budget to drive large-scale structural reform and create an entrepreneurial approach to government never seen before. I look forward to Elon and Vivek making changes to the federal bureaucracy with an eye on efficiency and at the same time making life better for all Americans. Importantly, we'll drive out the massive waste and fraud which exists throughout our annual $6.5 trillion of government spending. Okay, blah, blah, blah.
You see, we know what the real message is, but that description, it could be absolutely benevolent.
Well, actually, it's interesting. He says this has been the dream, right, of Republicans, but now we're going to do it.
Right. But it's the devil's in the process, right? And the devil's in what really happens.
Well,
this is cover to do all kinds of damage. But the actual statement of it sounds very Republican to me. I mean,
increase efficiency, blah, 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 blah.
Massive waste. And okay.
So I'm just going to quickly look at 3 tweets by Elon, okay, just to show you how into it he is.
Okay.
All right. So for those of you who are listening, it says Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, and it's got a picture of, I don't know, is it a dog or a fox or whatever, waving an American flag. So it all looks so happy and cartoonish and exciting and optimistic, right? Except what we're talking about is slashing the government by a third. Let's look at the next tweet. Doge. And it's for those of you who are just listening, it's like an artificial intelligence picture of Elon Musk he looks like the Terminator, right?
That's the point. He's supposed to look
Terminator glasses, right? He's meant to look like the Terminator, and he's got a big giant sign Doge in front of him while he's looking at you with that Terminator look. Right. So now, not so sweet, not the cute little fox, a little more like a killer. Mm-hmm. All right, let's look at the third tweet. And this is from Elon Musk. Threat to democracy? ? Nope. Threat to all caps bureaucracy! 3 exclamation points. So that's right. They're going to destroy the government bureaucracy. And by the way, it's not like he hasn't done this before, right? Let's look at the next headline. Musk's Twitter is the blueprint for a MAGA government. Fire everyone and turn it into a political weapon and let chaos reign. Right? That's what he did at Twitter.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as doing it to the government. There are unions, there are structures, there's all kinds of things for pushback. It has to all go through Congress. It has to be voted. It's not the same thing as buying a company and gutting it. Now, is it dangerous? Absolutely. But I just want to keep reminding the audience, that there are structural resistances to these kinds. This is not the first group of people coming in with radical ideas into government. But we'll see. I mean, I'm worried, but I don't.
Well, you're right, Harry. I mean, Rome wasn't burnt in a day.
Right.
It's going to take at least a few weeks, months.
It's going to take longer than that.
You and I had a conversation the other day, and we were talking about, well, how long is it going to take? Because I keep saying that this is going to move very quickly. And he said, look, it'll take them at least a year and a half to destroy the government. It's like, okay, but they've got 4. So,
well, look, this is the kind of discussion that John and I have. So Trump can do tariffs without Congress, and he can do rounding up immigrants without Congress's view, right? Stephen Miller, the Nazi of our time, wants to build internment camps outside of major cities. Now, if Trump arbitrarily says, I'm going to put 20% tariffs on every country, he's going to crash the economy. The outrage over families being rounded up and putting into camps is with the modern cell phone world that we live in and disseminate. It's not going to be as easy as it sounds, is all I'm trying to say. There's going to be pushback.
That's what they say, destroying a democracy, it's not as easy as it looks.
John,
he makes it look easy, but it's a lot harder than it looks.
He could also really screw up. He screwed up in his 4th year. He botched the pandemic because he had no guardrails, and he lost the election. He can lose the backing of the population if he screws up in terrible ways.
So the other thing about Elon Musk is they mentioned in that news report that he's been joining Trump on calls with international leaders.
I know.
Of course, with the Hatch Act, it's illegal for Trump to be speaking to national leaders because he's not president yet. But of course, Trump never saw a law that he felt he needed to obey.
None.
But now we have Elon Musk on these calls. Okay. There's no record of these calls. That we don't know what was said. It hasn't been provided to the State Department. But now Elon Musk is a shadow president. Okay. And so, of course, what did they do the day after Trump won? The very first thing he did, Trump and Musk called Zelensky.
Right, of course.
Okay. And we have no record of that phone call. However, due to the enterprising reporters at Shrinking Trump, we have obtained exclusive video of the phone call with Zelensky.
Who's her?
It's the witch. She's followed us here.
Surrender, Dorothy.
Oh.
I think that was the message that Zelensky got. Surrender, Dorothy. For those of you who are just listening, by the way, that was an excerpt from The Wizard of Oz.
I think people will recognize it. Yeah, Trump has made this big pronouncement to Russia saying, don't expand your war on Ukraine.
No, they're not listening to him, but they don't need to because they're going to be surrendering soon.
Well, I think what the rumor mill says, he's going to force Ukraine and Russia to declare a stalemate, and then Russia keeps everything it's already taken. Then the issue is, are there any guarantees that Putin won't just invade 6 months from now?
Right.
And there are none, because Trump and Putin are just so close.
Yeah.
Kindred spirits, soulmates.
Yeah. So, and by the way, we've talked about this. I'm not going to dwell on it right now, but the geopolitical consequences of what we're talking about, we're focused on the fact that we don't want to live in a dictatorship, and that should be our focus. But I'm equally concerned about the destabilization of the world order. People don't understand that we've grown up in the golden age of humanity. The greatest period of peace and prosperity in human history has been in our lifetimes. And the peace doesn't keep itself. NATO has been an organization that has kept the aggression of dictators at bay. Okay. Now that we are withdrawing from NATO and joining the dictators, okay, I don't know that Fortress Europe is going to be able to hold out. And I do think that Putin is going to be encouraged to attack further west, because he knows we're not going to do anything about it. Well, Harry, I guess we think that's got to be the end. That's got to be the end of the list of horrible people. It's got to be. But of course, it's not. Can we see the next headline? Michelle Goldberg, one of my favorite columnists at the time, says, if you thought Trump wasn't serious, look at his first appointments. Harry, maybe you could read this one.
A strange thing about the presidential campaign we just endured is how many people rationalized their support for Donald Trump by arguing that he wouldn't make good on some of his central promises. I think mass deportation is just talk, but the era of open borders will be over. Scott McConnell, a co-founder of the American Conservative, wrote on X in July. A Mexican-born Trump backer told the Times, last time he didn't even finish the wall. What's he going to do this time? Now the answer is taking shape. He's going to oversee a militarized mass roundup of the undocumented. On Sunday, Trump named Tom Homan, his former acting director of ICE, as border czar. In a speech to this year's National Conservatism Conference, Homan, who oversaw Trump's family separation policy, you remember that, folks, promised a, quote, historic deportation operation from which no undocumented immigrant would be safe. No one's off the table in the next administration. He said, if you're here illegally, you better be looking over your shoulder. Then on Monday, Trump named the obsessively anti-immigrant Stephen Miller as his deputy chief of staff. Miller's portfolio, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan reported in the Times, quote, is expected to be vast and to far exceed what the eventual title will convey, close quote. Miller has been forthright about his desire to purge immigrants here illegally, as well as many here legally, from the United States. Among other things, Miller has said that Trump would cancel the temporary protected status of thousands of Afghans who fled here after the Taliban's takeover and take another stab at ending DACA, the program that protects from deportation some immigrants brought to the United States as children. Most significantly, he's laid out plans to use National Guard troops to help arrest migrants en masse, warehousing them in military camps while they await deportation. No one should be shocked when this happens. I suspect some will be anyway.
So the pogrom is ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
Ready to go. The head of the child separation policy is the border czar. He's also announced he's going to be doing workplace raids. By the way, those of you who are farmers, good luck picking your product, your crop. Good luck, because when you show up at 5 a.m. and you expect your workers to be there, you're going to be in an empty field. Because when they hear that they're going to be arrested at work, they're not going to come to work.
And good luck, Trump administration, because if inflation goes back up again, you're screwed in 2026 if there are elections.
Big if. So, again, the worst people. And they're serious about this. They're serious about the concentration camps. They're serious about the militaristic roundups. This is going to be a true pogrom, and it's going to be. People thought it wasn't going to happen, and it's going to happen. And actually, it's interesting. A lot of people think they're safe. It's so interesting, right? Some people think they're safe. People with green cards think they're safe. Miller wants to get rid of people's. He wants to decertify as many green cards as possible. I was talking to a patient who's married to an American. He's from another country. He's an entrepreneur, and his wife is from the South. She's a Republican. He's not very political. He wasn't that upset about the election, but he wasn't a partisan either. But when we were talking about it, I said, "Well, you realize your status is potentially at risk." He turned white. He completely blanched. He said, "It is." Like, it didn't occur to him. But let's look at this next clip. They're going after legal immigrants. This is a tweet by Stephen Miller. Yes, we have started a new denaturalization project under Trump in 2025. Expect it to be turbocharged. That's right. They're going after people who have been awarded citizenship to take away their citizenship, to deport them.
Particularly the children born here of illegal immigrants.
Sure.
That's what it's really heading for, right? Trump wanted to get rid of the law that says if a child is born in the United States, they're American citizens. That's what he's talking about. That's what they want to do. In fact, when he was asked, so what happens if you discover a family and there's a mother and 2 kids, and the 2 kids were born here, so they're citizens, are you going to separate them? And Miller said, no, we'll deport all of them.
Right.
To American citizens.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter.
Right.
I mean, they're not really people anyway.
This is so anti-American. I can't think of anything more anti-American.
Me neither.
All right. So before we get to, we're going to be presenting what I'm calling our optimist corner, but some of the good signs, and we're going to keep this as an ongoing sequence, right? We don't just want to point out the gloom and doom. We do want to point out the pockets of optimism and resistance. But I want to talk a little bit about this issue of why we lost. We're going to talk with our guest, Drew Westin, who is one of our favorite guests before. We're having him back on as someone who's worked as a psychologist and really a political consultant for the Democrats. And I think that there's 2 issues that I would like to highlight here. One is that we didn't hold the coup plotters responsible, right? You're going to be surprised, but the people that I'm going to blame the most are in chronological order, Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. And let me tell you why. When we found out that Russia was influencing the election for Trump, Obama was informed of that by his intelligence services, and he did make a brief announcement about it. There was one day an article in the New York Times. He went to the Gang of Five, and Mitch McConnell said, if you announce that, I'll say you're being partisan. So he didn't announce it because he didn't want to seem partisan, and he thought Hillary was going to win anyway. I would argue that as commander-in-chief, The attack that we had on our elections is far more serious than Pearl Harbor. And for a commander-in-chief not to defend the country against a Pearl Harbor-style attack on our elections because he's afraid Mitch McConnell might say something bad about it was derelict in duty. I will say that Barack Obama, where it most counted in protecting our nation as commander-in-chief, was derelict in duty. And people may not like he might saying that, but I'm going to stick with
look,
it.
as much as of a fan of Obama that I am, and I'm a large one, he should have done that very differently.
Right.
That election should never have proceeded without the public knowing about the Russian.
Without the public knowing about it, right?
Right.
Instead,
No.
what we got was
known.
they should have known. They needed to know. It was important that they know. It was for our national security and our protection for them to know. Instead, what we get is Comey announcing the reinvestigation of the fake email case a few days before the election, when it should have been the opposite. We should have been announcing the investigation into Trump's collusion with Russia. And by the way, the people that forced Comey to make that announcement were the people at the New York FBI, one of whom has now been convicted of working for Russia.
Right.
The other mistake was Nancy Pelosi's. And let me just take a moment to mention this. Okay. So once Trump was elected, okay, then during the midterms, I actually met with Nancy Pelosi. I got nose to nose with Nancy Pelosi, me and my wife, at a fundraiser in Maryland. And we said, you should run on impeachment. And I actually had a chance to experience Nancy Pelosi's interpersonal force. She actually said, no. And I like a force field, like pushed me back. And she said, we're running on kitchen table issues. All right. She's the strategist. But once the election was over, I would argue again that Nancy Pelosi was derelict in duty. Because if you are the Speaker of the House and there has been an attack on the U.S. election and credible reason to believe that the president is in league with a foreign enemy, whether it's politically popular or not, you must initiate an impeachment inquiry. Inquiry. They didn't even launch an inquiry into this attack. Okay?
No, I hear you. No, of course. I mean, they were waiting for Mueller and all that stuff, but
we saw how that worked out.
No, it's terrible. And
terrible.
No, please, you're absolutely right. And the Republicans would have done it in a minute. They started inquiry into Biden when there was no reason for it.
Right.
When they were laughed at because they had no witness.
Yeah.
No, agreed. Now move on to Biden.
Okay. Well, and I just want to say that during that period, though, a lot of us really put our heart and soul into that impeachment movement, that need to impeach, but, just in my own little community, I mean, I organized an indivisible group to picket our Democratic politicians at the 4th of July parade. We got it in the Baltimore Sun. I led a group of 30 people into Sarbanes' office, and I did a Nancy Pelosi. I stood at the end of the conference room and I pointed at him and I yelled at him. Okay. And in the end, it was just that Nancy Pelosi was telling them, "You're right, that's me, right?"
He's unstoppable. We call it
I was
the Gartner
unstoppable.
factor is what we call the Gartner factor. You can't stop him.
You couldn't stop me, but that really didn't matter because it didn't do any good because they just didn't do an impeachment inquiry. And then finally, to get to Biden, we're going to talk about this again with Drew Westin, but it was a mistake to nominate Merrick Garland. He was already a conservative and a compromise candidate. The Obama picked to try to get a compromise candidate on the Supreme Court. He wasn't a Democrat. He wasn't someone who really supported our administration. He picked the wrong guy, and then he didn't fire him. Of course, he didn't fire anybody, no matter what their relationship was to the conspiracy, no matter how directly implicated they were. Even the guy who was the inspector general for the Secret Service, who was a suspect in the Secret Service text erasing scandal.
Those texts just got erased by all those.
Got erased. He's in charge of the investigation while being a suspect in the investigation. No one seemed to think that was a. So really, we didn't protect the people who had the power to protect the national security of the United States against this Russian takeover. Obama, Pelosi, and Biden did not do it. I'm just sorry, but that we can't change those facts. But the other thing that explains really our difficulty, a lot of people are doing a lot of postmortems, right? And they're saying, oh, the Democrats screwed up here, the Democrats screwed up there, they messaged this wrong, they messaged that wrong. I think people are missing the big picture. we've been railing against the media, right? And how the mainstream media hasn't been reporting on Trump's dementia or his malignant narcissism, right? I believe there is now a political disinformation complex that has such control over the narrative that it literally doesn't matter what Trump does or what he says. It doesn't matter what the Democrats do or what they say, because the narrative will always be distorted into a false narrative that will be repeated on right-wing media and then not really disputed in mainstream media. It'll be kind of both side-isms, both, it'll be kind of the conservative fake news will be discussed as a possible, option. And so with the conservative relentlessness, the sausage factory that constantly is making these things into a counter narrative, and the mainstream media not really countering the counter narrative, the effect is that the Republican narrative always wins. Well, one of the person who made this argument is Michael Tomasky, who is the editor-in-chief of the New Republican. I think he's one of their smartest writers. Let's see what he said about this. Why does no one understand the real reason Trump won? It wasn't the economy, it wasn't inflation, or anything else. It's how people perceive those things, which points to one overpowering answer. This line of analysis requires that we ask one more question, and it's the crucial one. Why didn't a majority of voters see these things and understand the answers to the question as to how to understand the answer to that question is how we start to dig out of this tragic mess? The answer is right-wing media. Today, the right-wing media, Fox News and the entire News Corporation, Newsmax, One America, News Network, and the Sinclair network of radio and TV stations and newspapers, iHeartMedia, the Bot Radio Network, Elon Musk's X, and huge podcasts like Joe Rogan's and much more, sets the news agenda in this country. And they fed their audiences a diet of slanted and distorted information that made it possible for Trump to win.
Yes, in part. I'll be presenting some data that suggests that's not completely true, but it's a huge factor.
Yeah. So I think the thing is we really need to, there's now something structural in our info system, in our information system, right, that is structurally distorted in a way that makes it very hard for us to break out of it, because on a day-to-day basis now, Pravda, we have our own Pravda, we have our own state-run sort of propaganda channels. And so that structural problem, I think, is one that we're going to have to deal with. Well, last week we've talked about how the mainstream media is starting to surrender in advance to Trump, right? And we talked about how Bezos famously, right, interrupted the Washington Post's attempt to endorse
Harris,
Kamala, right? Well, look at what Bezos tweeted after Trump's victory. Big congratulations to our 45th and now 47th president on an extraordinary political comeback and decisive victory, Bezos said in a statement. No nation has bigger opportunities. Yeah, excuse me while I throw up.
Trump hates him. It's not going to do anything. It's not
going to do anything. Now, all these people.
Such a cowardice. And no, it's just disgusting. And I use Amazon all the time. I'm sure as hell never going to buy a Tesla. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Ever. All right. You have one more quote?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that feeling of nausea, when we were going through this rogues gallery of cabinet appointments that look more like they should be on the FBI's most wanted list than on a list of cabinet members, I've just been feeling throw up in my throat, literally, for days now. It's so repulsive. Yeah, I just wanted to share that with all of you, in case any of you are tasting any throw up in your throats.
I'm sure everyone's really anxious to hear the details of the vomit in your throat.
Yeah, they're these little pieces, they just
okay.
All right, so I'm gonna end this with a quote from Voltaire talking about right-wing media. Some of you have seen this quote before, but I think it's really, really important. he really gets at the essence of why right-wing media is a dagger pointed to the neck of our democracy. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities.
Yeah, that's just so brilliant.
So brilliant.
It's
right?
so brilliant. And there was something about French thinkers, particularly in that period. They're just so succinct, so extraordinary. Now, listen, I don't believe things are as dire as John does. I think it's very bad. I mean, I don't want you guys to think I'm whistling Dixie. Like, I think our democracy is really at risk. But my belief is that, the weak young government that Hitler took over that was 15 years old, and that Putin took over from Yeltsin that was 15 years old. I mean, before the Soviet Union were the czars, and they had secret police, and so did the Soviet Union, and so does Putin. It's a cultural, political legacy throughout Russia. I mean, it's there was only a few minutes where there was a democracy in Russia in the last 200-300 years, right? We have 200 years plus of institutions, huge ones like the Pentagon. We do still have a free press that can push back. There are elections scheduled. It's not so easy to knock over a federal government, a federal system with independent states, with democratic governors. It's just not what you're saying is going to happen in like 6 months. Is it dangerous? Absolutely. Is it about to burn up? No, I disagree with you. So here's my optimist corner. And next week, I promise we're going to be a little bit more balanced, because you just in like an hour of hair on fire, and I want to present a bit of a balance for you. And what I have is the only media I was able to listen to, besides watching Trump's hideous election night speech and rally that was disturbing, was Ron Brownstein being interviewed by Bill Kristol. And Ron Brownstein is a political strategist and pollster, one of the best in the business. He's got to be in his late 70s. He looks like he's in his 50s. I've watched him since I was a young man in 1988. I've always obsessively followed politics, and I've always loved Brownstein. And there he is talking for an hour about this election. And I want to show you 3, not that long clips, but they're substantial clips to present another side of what John is saying. Let's begin with who voted for Trump.
Trump's retrospective job approval was rising, I believed, because people were judging him primarily through the lens of what they didn't like about Biden, which was inflation and the border, and all of the things that prevented Trump's approval rating from ever reaching 50 when he was actually president, the only president for which that was ever, that was true through his whole term. Those were receding in voters' minds. Now, I think if you look at these 2 data sources, the exit polls and the Votecast, they show you that voters, I think most voters are aware of the risks they are taking with Trump. Just let me walk through a few of these numbers. A majority of voters, roughly 55%, said that he was too extreme. 55%, again, roughly, said that they view him as a threat to democracy. A majority of voters in the Votecast, I believe, said they had an unfavorable view of him. This is while they are electing him. Still, somewhere around 2/3 of voters said abortion should be legal in all or most circumstances. A majority said they oppose mass deportation and believe undocumented should have a chance to apply for citizenship. Half of voters said they want the government more than half said they want the government more involved in providing access to health care coverage, health insurance.
So as much as there's a right-wing disinformation system that you bring up, and I think it's absolutely true, and I wouldn't argue with you about it, the voters know. They knew who they were voting for, and they're against what he was saying. And Brownstein is arguing that when it came to inflation, and remember, folks, it went up to 9%, and now it's down to 2 point something. but the prices are still up here. It's that they just haven't gone up higher. So Brownstein is saying when there's an election, when the wrong track is 70% and the economy is bad, people will vote for whoever's not in power. And he's just saying that's always how it's been. And I was really disturbed and furious that voters who voted for him knew what he was saying.
Yeah.
It's not that they were in a bubble and didn't know.
No,
they knew and they voted for him anyway.
I know.
Okay, next one.
That's the good news.
I like the fact that we have a public that doesn't like what he's going to do, but hopes he won't because they think he's going to help them economically. That means they're more easily peeled away from him if he tanks the economy. You see, that's why I have a little bit more hope than you. All right, next one.
I think overwhelmingly Trump, there's obviously somewhere in the mid 40s, low 40s of the electorate who wants him to do all of the most extreme things he's talking about. But the voters who elected him mostly want him to provide an economy that gives them more stability and breathing room. Some combination of moderated prices and growing wages that allows people to feel that their head is above water, even if they're not getting ahead. Again, 46% saying they are worse off. I think a lot of the things that he ran on face significant resistance in the electorate. I mean, certainly anything that will restrict abortion on a national level, be aside a ban, restricting access to abortion medication. Mass deportation in the exit poll had majority opposition, and that's before the first pictures of a mother and daughter being herded onto a bus, a van, or much less in one of Stephen Miller's, fever dream internment camps that he wants to build. Don't forget, the Sunday before the election on 60 Minutes, while most of the attention was focused on the island of garbage, joke. One of Trump's top immigration advisors went on 60 Minutes and was asked how they would avoid family separation, which was deeply unpopular, as you recall, during mass deportation, since there are 4 million U.S. citizen kids, Latino kids with at least one undocumented parents. And he said, we're going to avoid family separation by deporting the kids too, deporting the citizen kids too. If they really start doing that, how's that going to be received? I mean, there are a lot of landmines. I mean, certainly, there is room for him. Anything that goes toward reducing people's cost of living, he has, I think, a lot of leeway. So if he can portray rolling back the climate agenda and drilling more as a way to lower your energy costs, even voters concerned, again, you'll get that slice that we saw, even a share of the voters who are concerned about climate change will probably say, okay, we have to make this choice now. But when you start getting away from that, away from this central nexus of prices and affordability and my cost of living, I think there's a lot more risk for him on those fronts. People did not people were aware of, and it's not like the concerns about Trump have evaporated. They just sublimated them to their more immediate concerns about their economic situation. And I think he risks, depending on how far he goes in the directions that he's talked about, if he convenes a military tribunal to try Liz Cheney for treason or General Milley, that I don't think is going to be received very well.
So I just want to open the door for a little bit of hope. That's all I want to do, is because it's very different. This is not pre-World War II Germany, where Trump is not being adored by 70% of the country thinking that they should do everything that he says. The public made a very pragmatic choice. Mm-hmm. They watched the debate. They heard she spent $1 billion on advertising. This is not an impervious right-wing bubble that you're describing. It's significant, and I hate it. And we can talk about it. but the public knew. Now, I have one last clip to play you, because what we haven't mentioned is John and I in this show, and others as well, George Conway's back for another, we pushed the door open on Trump's cognitive decline and his personality disorder. And we pushed and we pushed and we pushed. And after Biden dropped out, by July, the press was starting to cover it. It became something that the Harris campaign took up. And I feel like the door is slammed again. Mm-hmm. I did watch Morning Joe for a few mornings and other things, and no one's talking about his being crazy. No one's talking about his kind of slippage. But Brownstein, at the end, it's after an hour and 40 minutes. Oh no, I'm sorry. After an hour, he finally gets to it, and I was so gratified. I really wanted to show it. Rex, can you show it to us?
And presumably Trump, assuming he does respect the Constitution enough not to run again, or he's just old enough that he won't do it. Yeah. I mean, I guess there's also a bit of it's not so obvious that, well, so much depends on how the administration goes, I guess, at that point.
Well, by the way, we never talked about that. Trump showed clear signs on the campaign of cognitive decline, right? Without a question. I mean, just the debate. I mean, he couldn't complete a thought. In many of his rallies, he just came up with the weave to explain why he could not complete a thought. You could argue that he's 78 now, right? Isn't that what Biden was when he went in 2020?
Yeah, it's almost a tiny bit older than Biden was when he won. Yeah,
and I would argue to you that he looks to have more challenges than Biden did when he started. So, not inconceivable to me. In a year or 18 months, a lot of voters look at Trump and have the same questions they did about Biden. Like, is he capable of doing this? And not saying that will happen, but if that does happen, it certainly seems possible. What is the effect of that over an extended period of time on the GOP's position heading into 2024? If, in fact, that deterioration, which I think was clearly evident at points during the campaign, continues. That was a problem. I mean, Biden's age became a symbol of weakness and out of touch and feeble. People don't see Trump as feeble, but there are already concerns in the electorate about whether he's too old to do the job, and he's just starting.
That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing was saying, like, he obviously showed signs of cognitive decline. Well, then why wasn't it obvious to the press? I mean, it is frustrating, right, to hear him say, like, well, it was so obvious. We all saw it. Well, if it's so obvious and we all saw it, well, why weren't the people who were watching the news hearing about it?
And why aren't they still talking about it?
Yeah.
There's this odd thing when someone's elected, suddenly you've got to give them a fresh start. You can't talk about how corrupt and disturbed they are. And this guy is a criminal. He's a rapist, and he's got cognitive dementia and a personality disorder. I mean, it's just astounding. Yeah. But people gave me some trouble in the comments about Mike kept saying he's so brilliant and charming in his rallies. Mm-hmm. He is. How else could someone with those deficits and that record manage to win again?
Yeah, actually, you did say something else too about the last clip that I wanted to say. About how people may react against him when they see these horrible images. Machiavelli said, "It's better to be feared than loved."
Oh yeah,
right. But you don't want to be hated. He says, if the leader is so morally abhorrent, right, to the population, then someone's going to try to kill him. Something's going to happen, right? There's going to be a movement against the leader. So you don't want to be so morally abhorrent to your own people, right, that you produce that kind of reactance. That makes your grip on power actually unstable. And I think that's probably what you're getting at. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Not to quibble over your quote, but what Machiavelli said was, it's best to be loved if you can't be loved,
Right.
then be feared.
Okay.
But don't be hated.
But don't be hated. Right, right.
And now I'm so happy to introduce our guest, actually reintroducing him. We saw him just before the election. We're so happy to have Dr. Drew Westin, who's an emeritus professor from Emory University. He has a background not only in clinical psychology, where he got his doctorate at the University of Michigan, but he also has a master's in political theory that he did before his clinical PhD. And while as a graduate student, he published Self and Society, a huge book integrating psychoanalytic theory and political theory. And then more recently, really making an even wider name for himself with the political brain, the role of emotion in deciding the fate of the nation. And those of you who don't really recognize that that cover is a nice twist on a Rorschach card. Full disclosure, as I said last time, not only is Drew an extraordinary person, but he was also my dissertation advisor. So I'm doubly happy to invite him back on the show. Welcome, Drew.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again, Drew. So, Drew, what the hell happened?
Well, I think a lot of things happened. I think the first thing that happened was the handoff from Biden to Harris was, in my mind, really problematic. I was worried about it at the time, and I was worried about it for two reasons. One was that she didn't get the legitimacy of either primaries or a brokered convention, and there was an idea going on when Biden stepped down before it became clear that everyone was piling on saying it's going to be Harris. There was an idea of having the top 3 or 4 candidates each do a town hall somewhere and then fight it out in the convention like they did in the old days, which would have been a very exciting convention. Wouldn't have been as pristine and as well, produced as hers. But the other thing about that was that, and the reason I say that was problematic was, as far as I know, Democrats, they did lots of polling to be able to tell Biden, yes, she can win, and you're going to have a slim chance. The problem with that was that they did no unconscious polling. That it is, Democrats are talking all the time about implicit bias against people of color and women. Well, you've got a woman and a person of color, and you're not measuring that and discounting the conscious polling findings by.
That's a good point. That's a certain number of percentage points, right?
You're looking at probably 4 or 5.
That's what I always thought.
And there you are.
And there you are. And this is it's a good reason why I think it made no sense to do it that way. And I'm going to say a very unwoke thing, and that is that I worried when they made that decision about the perception among voters who didn't watch carefully what was happening and didn't know that Harris actually stood by him till the end, and she was out there defending him after the debate. But if you didn't see that, what you saw was, here's this white guy, older white guy who was elected, and then some things happen in the Democratic Party outside of sight, and suddenly a woman of color appears in this place. And the that part's is not unwoke. It's just an observation that I think had an impact. But the other the part that is unwoke was you're running against the most dangerous man in the world. Yeah. That's not the time to experiment with. Wow, I wonder if we could elect a black woman. I mean,
not the time to break the glass ceiling.
Absolutely, it's like don't break the glass ceiling in 4 years, but don't break it now. And I think it was phenomenally stupid. I think it reflects the stupidity of the left and the just inability to understand ordinary people. I thought she ran until the end a really good campaign, It was flawless in lots of respects, but I'll come back to one in a minute if you'd like, that I think was, or two that were truly problematic at the end. Do you want to go ahead and so the
Sure.
first one was when your opponent runs a really, really well-crafted, devious but well-crafted attack ad. I believe 3,000 times for about $30 million, right? On the most expensive times, every NFL game and every World Series game. When they're doing that, you should bet that they probably know something. And all you had to do was watch that ad to know what they knew. It begins with Harris saying something phenomenally outside the mainstream, which I don't know many Democrats who would agree with it. And it was obvious. It was probably taken out of context, but she never answered it. And then it ends with that Karl Rovishly brilliant. She's for they them. He's for us.
Right.
And whoever controls us and them controls the narrative. And that you have to answer an ad like that, because if you think just from the point of view of how our brains work, if you've got one side is basically creating neural networks around her and wanting to allow every prisoner to transition, and then you've got that really awful she's for they them, he's for us, and you don't build up any counter narrative or counter associations, counter networks in the brain. All people have is this. And especially in a campaign that was so focused on women, to allow that to happen with men at football games, I mean, it's political malpractice. I have no idea who in her campaign thought that was a good idea. And frankly, there was a really easy answer to it. And it's one that Democrats just haven't been able to figure out how to get to easy answers on some of these things. Just like, she and Waltz both dodged the question when asked on more than one occasion, well, would you put any limits on abortion? And they dodged, and they said, well, it's a woman's right to decide with her own body. And that would be a good answer if they hadn't asked the question, would you put any limits? Because 6 centimeters dilated, you're okay. It's just a woman and her doctor. I don't think so. And most of us intuitively have the sense that when you get to about 5 months ish, that you're starting to have 3 people in the room, the woman, the doctor, and this fetus that is getting really close to viability. And you usually have a 4th who they always left out, which is the father, and that itself, leaving out the men, was a terrible mistake in the abortion messaging. I tried to call attention to some groups about it early, and they just wanted to treat it as a women's issue. I don't know about you guys, but the last time I looked, having children, reproduction, and contraception are men's issues too. Even though they more directly affect women, Parkinson's is 1.5 times as common in men as it is in women. So are we going to call it a men's issue? But it's an ideological thing, and it was a huge mistake. And with both of those, with both the trans issue and the abortion issue, and then with talking about the constant talk about how women are going to save us in this election. They're going 55-45 Democratic, and they're coming out in bigger numbers, and then the ad of showing the Neanderthal men with the women winking at each other. The message to men was, you're not just not in this game. You're an impediment. And then you wonder, the left has been busy telling white people that they're privileged when 40% of white people don't have college educations, and they are not privileged. They might be privileged relative to black people in the same position, some of them, but they are certainly not privileged, and they did not feel privileged economically. But we use the word privilege, and then when you say the same thing, tell men that their masculinity is toxic, and then you say, God, I wonder why we're losing working class white people and why we're losing men. Well, if you tell them to screw off, they'll leave you. I mean, there were other things that I think are important, but just from the Democratic side, those were in an otherwise really good campaign. Those were completely unforced errors.
So, Drew, I know you are an expert on messaging. In fact, particularly an expert on Democratic messaging. But there's Michael Tomasky.
Apparently not, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, yes, you are. Michael Tomasky, though, he had an article in the New Republic where he kind of argued that the messaging almost doesn't matter at this point because the right wing has so controlled the media environment that there's like a drumbeat every day, every news cycle. The counter narrative, right, keeps being pounded into the brains of half of America, and then the mainstream media does this kind of whataboutism, where they introduce the right wing conspiracy theories and then discuss them. Maybe they're true, maybe they're not true, and so the net result is that the whole table is tilted to the right, and so. It may even be at this point where we're kind of all blaming ourselves. Oh, if only they'd message this, if only they'd message that. When the point is, look, if they can make an insurrection disappear, if they can create a false election conspiracy, if they can make Russia disappear, if they can make rape disappear, if they can make 34 felony convictions disappear, you know what I'm saying? What can't they counter narrative out of existence?
Right. Well, so I'll mention, I think you're totally right. And I think even if you left out messaging on our side, although there were 66 million people who watched the debate between Harris and right. So there was some area of overlap, but not much. And you're right. And most people on the right are getting their news from Fox, Newsmax, or Facebook friends, or if they're younger, TikTok friends, and with no controls on those whatsoever. And the person who we don't remember was responsible for that and made the absolute, I believe, worst executive decision that any president has ever made. Was Ronald Reagan when he eliminated the fairness doctrine.
Yes.
Which meant that you had, for people who don't know, it meant in the old days when people like us roamed the earth, you would never see a person from the left without a person on the right speaking. And that's because it was a rule. If you wanted to be on the air, you couldn't do that because they were trying to avoid propaganda. They knew,
and you had to be factually correct. You had to, if you had to demonstrate a certain level of factual correctness in order to maintain your license. So here's Fox that just got sued for lying with these voting machines. That's the kind of thing that could, in the past, when we had this law, which a lot of people don't know about, but you're right, that was a crucial breakdown in civilization, because now there was no standard anymore for journalism. And so they can lie all they want now with no consequence.
Well, and the two people who spoke most profoundly about that, although one of them I would never imagine using the word profound in speaking of him, were Hannah Arendt, who talked about the fire hose of falsehoods, and that if you just keep a fire hose of falsehoods going, then people can't tell truth from falsehood, and then they just default to whatever irrational things or whatever their prejudices are, or wherever they lean. The other person who spoke most directly about that was Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, followed by his propagandist Goebbels, it was Hitler who, and this is a failure by the media. We heard about the big lie over and over and over again. No one ever said, where that term, the big lie, came from? It came from Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. And I know it's amazing, because I've watched all the times that people have used the word. I've never heard anyone say where it came from. I had to look it up because I was pretty sure it came from Goebbels. And the idea was, what you do is you tell a really big lie, and then you start telling really little lies. And after a while, people are like, well, maybe that's true. And that was the idea behind that kind of propaganda. It was also the idea behind the fairness doctrine and behind the idea that the newsrooms used to have, that you can't put on a fire hose of falsehood. Right. But I'll mention one other person who I think made the other difference, and was. I'm a real fan of Joe Biden. I think had it not been for the election of Trump, who's going to do what he did to Obama, which is to undo everything that his predecessor did, just because his predecessor did it, because he's just a vindictive man. And it's so sad because he did so many things to bring manufacturing back, to bring up our productivity, to start decreasing the gap between the wealthy and the working, and to decrease the gap between blacks and whites. And he was no one else in the world, I don't think, could have ever united Europe the way he did, and in quarantining Putin. I mean, that was an unbelievable task, and to add members of NATO. I mean, so he had an incredible presidency, but he made, I believe, one disastrously bad decision, and that was Merrick Garland. And about 3 years ago, I was on a panel with some national security experts, and I said that. This was before I think it was before Jack Smith had been appointed. And I said that the two most dangerous men in America are Donald Trump and Merrick Garland. And that Garland has, he doesn't have, pardon my language, but he doesn't have the balls you would expect for someone who's a male attorney general, and he doesn't have the ovaries of someone like Nancy Pelosi. He just was a, he's a castrato, and if there's anything that we've learned from this last election, it is that you never elect or appoint either felons or castrati. But he was someone who was absolutely the most. He was obsessional. He was, let me get all the rules right. I'm bound by the rules. The idea that the judicial calendar and the political calendar have nothing to do with each other is absolutely as it should be in normal times. Right. But when you've just had a coup attempt, you do not allow the head of the snake to come out and create an alternative reality. And you don't allow 147 members of Congress who, after the coup attempt, voted not to seat the rightful electors of Joe Biden. You sweep them all up, you put them in prison, you make an example of them, and you say to everybody else out there, you want to join this seditious conspiracy? Go for it. You're going to be on the same rung of hell as Benedict Arnold, and you're going to be bunking up with these guys. If you really like Trump, maybe you'll get to bunk up with him.
We are going to actually have to end, but I do have one last question, which is, we've been asking ourselves, as a psychologist, what can you say to our listeners and viewers about how they can cope?
It's a tough question. I'm sure you guys have been talking about this a good bit. What I think the best you can do is to take the good news that we're seeing. In the past, we wouldn't have seen Marco Rubio as a Secretary of State as good news, but it was good news because he's been on the Foreign Relations Committee. He actually knows something about it. He's got some well-defined views, but they're not outside the mainstream.
He's the only one who isn't on the FBI most wanted list.
Yeah, well, that's right, and that's the other side of it. Is to have another sex offender other than the president to be the attorney general. That will be probably a worse decision than Merrick Garland. but I think they're pretty close.
Well, no, I think we're in for some very, very scary times. And who knows? Maybe we'll be broadcasting Shrinking Trump from France. But we'll have you back, Drew.
I'll be there with you, brother.
Right. All right.
Excellent.
Thanks, Drew.
Great to see you
guys.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Well, Harry, I think that brings us to the shrink wrap section of our show. What have we learned today?
Oh boy, what did we learn today? We really haven't learned that much. What we've done is experience the first wave of Trump's activity. And
maybe I should say, what have we endured? What have we learned?
I still like the question, what have we learned today? But I think in this case, we have to learn about how we're going to process what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
And right now, what we're doing is taking it in. Yeah. And you're presenting your fears, and I'm agreeing with you on some of them, and asking you to be a little bit more cautious, because I think there are some forces to stop him, but that it is a terrible, terrible position we're in. And I'm miserable about it. I'm sad. I'm rageful. I think I've told people that, if Trump really does, have a military tribunal for Liz Cheney, which I don't even see how that could happen. But if that kind of thing happens, I'm not sticking around.
Yeah, I have to say, in addition to all the emotional reactions you described, I found myself weeping, uncontrollably at random times. I just wanted to say that, because I think other people are feeling that level of pain also. And I think that we really do have to, and you're right, as psychologists, we're saying, look, how are we going to help people process this? How are we going to manage it? I think we really do have to steel ourselves, for a protracted period of darkness. We're entering a period, it's midnight in America, whatever metaphor you want to, or I think about Elie Wiesel's book entitled Night. I believe that we are entering a dark period in history. Okay. And I think, as you know, I'm sort of a mystic. I think about the yin yang symbol, how half of it is white, right? And half of it is black, those interlocking kind of fish kind of shapes inside the circle, right? And so this is meant to sort of show, what the universe is like. And it's half light, right? But it's also half dark. And I think we're entering into the dark phase of that circle. But in each side, in the dark side, there's a white dot. And in the white side, there's a dark dot, and the dark side, there's a white dot. So it's not all black. Even in the period of deepest blackness, right, there's still a dot of light. And I believe that dot of light, and this is where I think, we get into people's existential beliefs, right? To me, it's the soul. To me, it's our consciousness. It's our kind of that little bit of humanity inside of us, or the spark of the image of God, or our consciousness, as the Easterners call it, or just our humanity. But I think the thing is, whatever you believe, that, because this isn't really the issue, as a practice, we need to nurture that little dot of light. Okay, we need to keep it alive. We need to do things that nurture it.
I believe that the moral, the loving, the spiritual, the empathic side of human nature will be mobilized if we see our political structures collapse. And there will be a resistance, no matter what. That was true in the Soviet Union. It's true everywhere where there is oppression. But I am hopeful that the 47% of the country that voted for Trump, for Harris, and wanted to push back against Trump, that there's some force in that. And I want us to mobilize that force. I want us to contribute to it in our own way. And the way that we can is really, because again, we're not pundits. We're psychologists who are trying to point out the disturbances, trying to point out the malevolence that we see that's being arrayed by a severe sociopathic narcissist. and we're watching it happen. And we hope to keep pointing it out so that when he does crash everything, and I think he will, there'll be a groundswell to protect the system. And I'm hoping that happens. I'm not saying it will, but I want to do everything I can to help make that happen.
Agreed. And I came across this quote that I just wanted to share with people, because it's a quote from Camus, actually, about how to kind of keep your sanity in insane times. And the thing I like about it is it's not, he's not coming obviously from a spiritual point of view. He's coming from an existential point of view. But let's see what his advice was. Find meaning. Distinguish melancholy from sadness. Go out for a walk. It doesn't have to be a romantic walk in the park. Spring at its most spectacular moment, flowers and smells and outstanding poetical imagery smoothly transferring you into another world. It doesn't have to be a walk during which you'll have multiple life epiphanies and discover meanings no other brain has ever managed to encounter. Do not be afraid of spending quality time by yourself. Find meaning, or don't find meaning, but steal some time and give it freely and exclusively to your own self. Opt for privacy and solitude. That doesn't make you antisocial or cause you to reject the rest of the world, but you need to breathe and you need to be.
Beautiful and true. Well, John, I know you have a clip to play to take the show out.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna say goodbye, and we're gonna leave the last word to Kamala. In a way, we're kind of saying goodbye to her. But this is the advice she gave us upon conceding. This is the advice she gave us on how to keep our inner flame and our national flame alive.
And remember that line that she has lived the promise of America. And that's where this comfort comes from. Listen, for John and for me, thank you all for watching. We so appreciate you, and we hope you stick with us. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, take care of yourselves. Be well.
Yes, please do.
And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service.